The morning sun cast long, golden shadows across the polished wooden benches of the courtroom as the doors swung open for the day. This was a place where stories collided, where the tangled threads of human lives were brought before the steady hand of justice to be unraveled. On this particular morning, the air was thick with a quiet hum of anticipation. Wanda Lucero stood with her sister, their faces etched with the weary but determined lines of those who had spent a lifetime caring for others. They were there for Liz, a 38-year-old woman who saw the world through a simpler, more vulnerable lens. Liz was what some might call challenged, a soul who required a gentle touch and a safe harbor, things that had recently been stripped away in a chaotic confrontation in San Bernardino. The Honorable Judge Judy took her seat, her presence commanding immediate silence. She looked down at the documents for Case 3011, Lucero v. Block. The dispute seemed simple on paper, a matter of property damage in a scratched car, but as the testimony began, it revealed a much deeper narrative of family loyalty and the systemic failures of care. Wanda Lucero began to recount the history, her voice steady but filled with emotion. It had all started in March of the year 2022. Her sister, reaching a stage in life where she could no longer manage alone, had moved into a senior community. This left Liz in need of a new home. Through a series of unfortunate events, including a brief period of homelessness and a hospital stay for an infection, a social worker had pointed them toward a boarding house run by a man named Lawrence Block. Lawrence Block sat across the room, a man who viewed his 5-bedroom house on a quiet street in the 92404 zip code as a business. He described it as a room and board facility, licensed by the city to rent rooms to those with psychological disabilities. At any given time, 8 to 10 residents shared the 2,000-square-foot space, overseen by a house manager who was also a tenant. To Lawrence, it was a managed environment where food was secured in the garage to prevent pillaging. To Wanda, however, the house had begun to feel less like a haven and more like a source of distress. The rent had started at $750, but the true cost was measured in the growing unease she felt every time she visited her niece. The breaking point arrived on November 30th. Wanda had gone to the house to pick up Liz for a doctor appointment. Inside the small shared bedroom, a disturbing scene unfolded. Liz, in a state of confusion, began flinging undergarments toward her roommate, who also happened to be the house manager. Once they were safely inside the car, the truth came out in a heartbreaking revelation. Liz explained that the manager had instructed her to hide the items in her purse while they were at a Walmart. The realization hit Wanda like a physical blow. Her niece had been used to commit a theft. It was a final straw. Without notifying anyone, Wanda returned to the house at 3 o'clock that afternoon, armed with heavy-duty garbage bags and a fierce determination to remove Liz from that environment forever. While Wanda and her sister were inside packing Liz's life into bags, Lawrence's son arrived at the house to perform an errand. The situation escalated rapidly. Wanda, wanting to ensure she could retrieve a specific clothes hamper from the garage, positioned her vehicle in a way that blocked the driveway. She felt it was the only way to get the manager's attention and secure the last of her niece's belongings. Lawrence's son, feeling trapped and frustrated, called his father. Lawrence, who was at a community hospital interviewing a potential new client, was fumed. He saw the situation as his son being held hostage by an irate woman. By the time Lawrence arrived an hour later, the driveway had become a stage for a heated standoff. When Lawrence pulled up, he saw Wanda's dark utility vehicle obstructing the path. His temper, fueled by a protective instinct for his son, boiled over. He approached the car where Wanda was sitting in the driver's seat, with her sister and the fragile Liz watching in terror. In a moment he later described as not being completely rational, Lawrence reached out and grabbed the handle of the car door. He pulled it open, shouting for her to move. Wanda recounted the fear that gripped her as he grabbed her car door remote and slammed the door with such force that she feared for their safety. She claimed he hit her windshield and moved to the back, scratching the paint with a heavy object before opening the rear door and throwing the bags of Liz's belongings onto the pavement. In the courtroom, Lawrence denied the extent of the damage. He insisted he had only touched the handle and had not scratched the car or thrown the bags with such violence. He argued that it was a back-and-forth situation, an ongoing argument where both sides used profanity. But the judge was focused on the fundamental rights of the individuals involved. She reminded Lawrence that he had no right to put his hands on another person's vehicle or to escalate a situation into a physical confrontation, especially in front of a vulnerable person like Liz. The judge noted with a sharp wit that while it was a business, it was one that required a level of care and temperament that seemed to be lacking in this instance. The testimony shifted to the specific damages. Wanda presented a bill for the repairs to her car, noting that her out-of-pocket expense for the insurance deductible was $250. She also listed a replacement garage door opener for $134.95, though Lawrence denied ever touching it. The judge carefully weighed the evidence, including a video taken by Lawrence's son that showed the bag sitting in the back of the car rather than strewn across the street, as Wanda had initially described. However, the intimidation and the admitted act of opening the car door weighed heavily in the court's mind. The judge's ruling was a reflection of both the law and a moral lesson on the responsibilities of those who care for the challenged. She awarded a judgment of $385 to Wanda Lucero, covering the deductible and a portion of the other claims. As the gavel struck, ending case 3011, the courtroom felt a sense of quiet resolution. But the story did not end with the judgment. The judge and her clerk remained to discuss the broader implications of the case. They expressed a shared disbelief that such facilities, housing highly vulnerable populations, could operate with so little government oversight. They noted the irony that a person needs a license to give a pedicure, yet almost anyone can open their doors to the psychologically disabled without rigorous checks and balances. Wanda and her sister left the courthouse, the weight of the past year beginning to lift. They had fought for Liz's dignity and won a small but significant victory. The money was secondary to the principle that their niece deserved to be treated with respect and safety. As they drove away from the San Bernardino courthouse, the city blurred past them, a landscape of challenges and triumphs. They knew the road ahead would still require vigilance, but they were no longer alone in their struggle. The values of education, human decency, and the power of family had been reaffirmed. The story of the scratched car and the closed hamper was ultimately a story of love, a reminder that even in the face of frustration and systemic flaws, the light of human compassion can still find a way to shine through.